last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. No one could have dreamed we were being scrutinized as someone with a microscope studies creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this Earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans against us.
Broadcasting live
from a tiny studio somewhere in North America.
This is Dark Matters Radio Live. And now I give you your host,
the silverback of ufology.
Here's Don Ecker.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to a brand new edition of Dark Matters Radio. I am your host. My name is Don Ecker, and every last single audio scintilla is being brought to you courtesy of KGRA Radio, your contact point to the paranormal. Now, at the very, very beginning of the introduction of this show, you hear Richard Burton from his stint on War of the Worlds. And War of the Worlds, of course, is one of those classic science fiction stories going all the way back to the 19th century, which involved an alien invasion from the planet Mars. Yep, those sneaky Martians came to Earth in their spaceships with their heat rays and other stuff and invaded the planet. And guess what stopped them? The military organizations of planet Earth? Oh, no. But my guest tonight, Dr. John Brandenburg, might be able to elucidate to us exactly what that was that knocked those pesky Martians out of play. John, what the heck was it?
Poor planning.
Yeah, really.
No, it was, of course, viruses and bacteria, which they had no immunity to.
Looks like those damn Martians used it on us, doesn't it? Because right now we are in what? Week 5 or week 6?
We're up a creek right now. That's where we are.
Of lockdown. Now, the day before yesterday, Dr. John Brandenburg sent me a video. And I got to tell you, I watched it, and then I basically laughed my tail end off. John, tell us what it was.
Well, this country is being pushed to the limit in many areas, and one of the areas is toilet paper production. And the video is a spectacular explosion, which miraculously resulted in no loss of life in Maine, where a truck driver, it's a dash cam video from a truck driver waiting to drop off his load of wood at a toilet paper factory, and he watches in the distance as it explodes with a magnificent mushroom cloud and then begins to rain debris on his truck and the rest of the trucks in line. And he gives a running 4-letter word laden commentary.
I got to tell you, I watched that video, and right near the end of the video, all of a sudden this stuff rains down on his windshield. Yeah. And I thought at first, John, the stuff raining down, somebody blew up an outhouse. That's what I thought it was.
I think it was I've been sending that video out to people, especially you, Don, because I figure it's the perfect metaphor for what this country is going through right now.
This is genuinely, ladies and gentlemen, if I may be so bold, where the shit hit the fan.
Certainly did.
Oh my God! So, John, since you've been on last time, how you been?
Scientist, having seen minor amounts of shit hit various fans in my career, this one was one of the best, especially because no one got killed miraculously.
How you been since you've been last on?
Oh, I've actually been great. I'm going slowly crazy here in my apartment, but that's okay. I lost my mind the other day and found it between the seat cushions on my couch later in the day, and it's been a trial. Fortunately, I am able to work from home, so I have not lost my job, and so I'm very fortunate in that way. But one of the problems we're dealing with is we have, of course, scientists in the medical field, but they are not economists. They are focused entirely on the virus and its effects on the American population, and they should be. But, if you ask them, well, how long should we shut down the country, they'll say, 3 years at least. And you ask them then, well, won't everyone lose their jobs? Aren't you afraid of losing their jobs? And they say, oh, no, I'm a tenured professor at a university. I can't lose my job.
Well, look, those morons, and I'm just going to call it like I damned well see it, those morons, don't they realize that we wouldn't have a damned country if they locked it down that long? Right now, right now, we are in a genuine bucket of doo-doo economically, John.
Yes?
A bucket. I'll give you an example, okay?
Sure.
Right now, right this very minute, the Constitution of the United States that guarantees freedom to every American citizen, the freedom to assemble, the freedom to travel unrestricted. All these things are right now under direct assault. Right before this show, I was going through some news stories where I saw people that gathered together, now not necessarily elbow to elbow, but attended church services for Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday, were being fined and ticketed by the police. Right now, across the country, massive disobedience is beginning to bubble up. And some of these damn governors, wait a minute, let me finish. Some of these damn governors right now better take a look, because even with the coronavirus as it is, it has not matched the figures that the regular flu does to the population each flu season.
True.
So I don't know. I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but by God, I smell a rat somewhere.
Well, they tended to look at worst case scenarios, figuring it was better to overreact than underreact. And I think we just dodged a big bullet in this country. We seem to be coming out of this. We seem to be turning the corner on this, and the new cases are going down rapidly. I think we're going to be fine. But their initial reaction was almost panic once they figured out what was happening.
You know how many people lost their damn job in the last week? 22 to 25 million people lost their job.
Oh, I know. And if you and I have been through a number of recessions, you know that a long recession, that causes a death toll too. People lose hope. They start using drugs, alcohol. They commit suicide. Breaks up families. It's just, but these, you got to realize these people, a lot of them spend their whole careers looking through microscopes. And all they care about is what's on the plate in front of the microscope for them, and they don't see the bigger picture. One of the points of pride of some scientists is that I know everything about nothing. I've specialized in just one area of human activity, and I don't care about anything else. And so I think it's part of the scientific specialization of some of these people that they don't know anything about the rest of the economy and they don't care.
Well, yeah, if they get into trouble, they get what? They get a grant.
I know.
Where's that grant coming from, buddy?
You ask them, if all the American people are out of work, where are they going to get money? They'll say, well, they'll get grants, just like I do.
Yeah.
And then you'll ask them, where does the grant money come from? And they'll say, the taxpayers.
Yeah, you got a real problem there. Well, look, I've been, even though I haven't wanted to, I've been following this very closely. I haven't had an option. I mean, you turn on the boob tube. Every news program from top to bottom is about, and I grit my teeth when I even say this because, John, I swear to God, when I hear this phrase, COVID-19, I just start to tremble. Okay, I'm so sick of hearing that. But the bottom line is that we're going to have to bite a bullet here pretty soon, or the whole economic structure of this nation is going to come unravel. It's unraveling now.
It is unraveling now, and that's going to cause mass death. So you have to get the country back on the job again. We have, it looks like, defeated this initial thing on this virus. I think we have. We've turned the corner.
You know the Spanish flu epidemic in 1918, which
now, Don,
was
you can't call it the
horrible.
Spanish flu anymore. That's xenophobic.
Well, no, the Spanish flu of 1918, 1919 was, anywhere between 50 million plus worldwide ended up dying from that flu.
Wiped out whole communities.
The government of the United States did not even recognize the damn thing.
Yep. Yeah,
so now look, don't think that I'm not cognizant of the fact that this particular virus is highly contagious. I know that it is, and that many people are asymptomatic to showing any symptoms that they even have the virus. But with that being said, the death from it at this point, I'm not sure it rates what we've done to ourselves at this time. Do you?
Oh, we'll have to, let's call it a fog of war situation where Omar Bradley talked about World War II, and he talked about all the big victory they won breaking out of Normandy along St. Lo and everything, and Avranches, and he said, well, it was really nice to go down there and visit it after the war and see all the roads and stuff. But he says, that's like touring someplace in broad daylight when the last time you were there, it was pitch dark. And so we're gonna have a long postmortem on that thing. That is why hindsight is 2020, because you know so much more information. You have reliable information. Well, and the People's Republic of China was feeding us bad information for the first month.
Deliberately, also.
Oh,
Deliberately.
absolutely.
Not by mistake. Those sons
Not
of
by
bitches.
mistake.
Those sons of bitches did it deliberately. When they shut
Well,
down.
we're going to have to re-examine that relationship, aren't we, after this is all over?
Well, they're culpable.
This could happen again next year.
Well, yeah, and there could be a second wave of it after this one recedes.
Well, I think we'll have a vaccine by the fall, and remembering back to the polio epidemics we had, they got a vaccine together, and they didn't test it that thoroughly, and they just inoculated everybody, and it stopped it.
I can remember when that happened, which really dates me, but I can recall my mother and dad taking me down to this place where they were dealing out the polio vaccine, and
yes.
This guy handed me a little cup, a little paper cup with a sugar cube in it.
Yep.
And there was pink stuff on top of the sugar cube.
Yep.
And they told me to eat it, and it was the polio vaccine.
Yep.
And I can
too.
remember that back in those days, in the summertime, people were even hesitant to allow their kids to go to a public swimming pool because of polio.
I remember going down to my junior high near my house, and we were all standing in line to get the polio vaccine. And they were just handing it out for free. And they're going to do the same thing with a vaccine for this thing. We're not going to go through this again.
Well, okay. What do you recall? What do you recall about that when you were a child? Because in this country, until basically the borders broke down, we had, as a nation, eradicated most of those horrific diseases that have plagued humankind since there have been humankind. Tuberculosis, polio, of course, many other diseases that just were wiped out. And now, suddenly, many of those diseases are making a resurgence. What do you think about that?
Well, we have to, of course, get control of the borders and make sure that nobody comes into this country unless they are healthy and don't carry any obvious infections. That's just standard public health practice. I just think that I'll give you an example. My mother had polio when she was young, and so did my grandfather on my father's side, and it left them both kind of semi-disabled. So we don't want to go back to those days.
Well, a lot of people today are not even aware that President Franklin Roosevelt, who led the American people during the Second World War, was a victim of polio. Of course, back in those days, the news media kept that. They never discussed that. And a lot of people were not even aware that he was disabled from that disease.
That's right. The news media was a lot different in those days, at least to people of the Democrat Party. So it was everybody was on the same team in those days.
You're a rocket guy. Excuse me, John. You're a rocket scientist.
I'm only a rocket scientist, Don.
I read another news article today about fears of the virus making it to the International Space Station. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, they're now finding out that this virus is remarkably contagious. And they're doing testing like in Santa Clara, where we had one of the earliest cases in California. A guy came home from China and gave it to his wife, and they found out that the infection rate, 4% of the population has been exposed to this. In other words, this virus has been circulating in the population for months. And no one has really kind of noticed it until it started putting people in the hospital. So a lot of people have gotten this thing and don't even know it.
Well, we have it here. You also live in California. We have a very large Asian population in California, especially up north, and a lot of those folks were world travelers, many of them for business, familial, and other reasons have been traveling to and from China.
In particular, and there's a lot of travel back to China, the old country.
Yeah, the current thinking is that virus was brought here months and months ago, and a lot of people may have had it. But there's a herd immunity as a result of that. I'm sure you've heard those speculations.
Yes, and so what they're finding out in Santa Clara County is that this virus was very much going from person to person very rapidly months ago, and nobody even knew it. Thank God it isn't that. And in fact, its lethality rate and the rate of actually people getting seriously sick is apparently quite low. Thank God. It's amazing how contagious this stuff is. It's much more contagious than even your regular flu or cold, apparently, which, of course, goes back to how did this virus come into being in the first place? If it's that contagious, why haven't we seen it before, etc.?
Well, the last time you were on the show, you came on and you were talking about a scientific group gathering that you were invited to attend, I believe in New Mexico. Yes. And some of those folks had been, over the years, going back into the remote viewing, the official remote viewing days, had been discussing then, and this is several months back, had been discussing that they believed through remote viewing and other things that the virus actually came from a laboratory in Wuhan. Okay, now at that point, John, everybody was poo-pooing the idea that this was out of a lab, that it came from the wet market. But guess what? In the last week, apparently, through State Department cables that had been gathered up somehow, it appears that it basically escaped the lab.
Yeah. Yes, unfortunately.
And the Chinese lied to us about that. They know it. They shut down Wuhan, but still allowed people to fly out on international flights. So that would seem to me, as a former criminal investigator and police officer, they are culpable in this. Are they not?
I'm afraid so. The theory being that they knew this was going to be a major disaster for their own economy, and they wanted to make sure that the United States suffered a disaster also, which we have. So, as I said earlier, we're going to have to really re-examine our relationship with the People's Republic of China. I have no beef at all with the Chinese people. They're incredibly talented and resilient. They've gone through all these disasters before. Many of them were inflicted on them by their own government. But the present government of the People's Republic of China, I don't think we can deal with them anymore as friends, or even just trading partners the way we used to. This thing can happen next year again with a different virus.
Well, we're still getting hit with the Spanish flu that hit us a century and 2 years ago. Just a different mutation, but it's the same flu.
Oh, yeah. It became... nature actually likes less, the flu that's running around now every year is probably just a mutated version of the Spanish flu, and nature likes apparently infections that spread well and don't kill their carriers because they want their carriers to go spread the virus more. So it's bad for business if you.
Well, believe it or not, we're the first break, John. So stand by. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight my very special guest and longtime friend, Dr. John Brandenburg, is joining us here on Dark Matters Radio, and we've got a lot more coming up, so stick around.
Okay, nurse, let's get this man to the ER stat.
Right away, doctor.
We see this every day. Heart attack or angina pain due to blocked and clogged arteries. Chelation can remove obstructions or blockages from arteries and help avoid painful and expensive surgery. Now there's Angioprim. It's a liquid oral chelation product that you take with juice. You start to feel the results fast. Angioprim increases blood flow all over the body, and that means more energy and strength to take on the day with less aches and pains. 60 years of research has gone into chelation, and Angioprim is the result. A safe and easy way to unblock your veins and arteries from buildup that slow circulation.
Paging Dr. Jones. Please report to the emergency room right away.
Log on now to angioprim.com. That's ANGIOPRIM.com. Or to speak with a trained consultant. Give Angioprim a call at 954-882-7221. That's 954-882-7221.
Folks, this is very important information. What's to be said about CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. Our CBD is made from hemp and has 0.003 THC, which means this wonderful product won't get you high, no matter what amount you take. What does CBD do for the body? My hands are tied. But you can Google CBD benefits and be astounded. When you're finished reading, you'll want to log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. and purchase. Life is good when you feel good. People are tired of pain. People are asking for non-GMO organic products to help them with, you fill in the blank. Legal in 49 states, and again, our CBD is made from hemp. Ancient Life Oil is about helping people one by one by one. If you wonder how good the product is, the CEO takes it every day without miss. AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Have a great day.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA. KGRARadio.com.
And we are back with Dr. John Brandenburg and our illustrious producer, Bill Skywatcher, as always, does one knock-up, bang-up job. So we're back, and John, we were very briefly, right before we came back to the air, you were telling me about an interview on CNN you saw with Democratic presidential, candidate Joe Biden. What was exactly going on there?
I just mentioned this because he was being interviewed by Anderson Cooper and Sanjay Gupta, and who's is a doctor and a pretty good one, and you can see that during the interview, Gupta starts looking more and more concerned as Joe gets lost in a kind of verbal jumble during the interview. And one of the problems that Joe Biden has faced, like a lot of other Americans, is being isolated at home. And it has a debilitating effect on all of us. But especially if you're an old guy, I think the effects of this are being seen. And so anyway, I encourage everybody, without further comment, I encourage everyone to look at the interview between Anderson Cooper, Sanjay Gupta, and Joe Biden that was done today, and especially watch Gupta's reaction.
Were they talking about the COVID-19 virus?
Yeah, they were talking about that, and Biden was talking about President Roosevelt mobilizing everything in World War II, but it all turned into a big kind of verbal jumble very quickly, and you could just see that Gupta was looking more and more grim.
There's a phrase that defines that. It's called word salad. Everything gets jumbled up.
I don't know.
In word salad.
I thought, well, is it just me? And then I'm realizing, no, I'm looking at Gupta, who's a doctor, and he's sitting there listening to this, and apparently he didn't say anything, and you could just see him looking more and more grim as he listens to Joe. And Joe's been around a long time. He'd be a great guy to have a beer with. But anyway, and that's all I'll just urge everyone to watch that interview.
Well, which reminds me, he has a propensity, Biden that is, of smelling girls' hair. Now, speaking of hair, I got a little story to tell you. So, my wife Vicky, for the last several years, has been cutting my hair. Now, the end of December, she was in an accident where she took a tremendously bad fall. She dislocated her shoulder on her right side, and her arm has been basically useless ever since. Now, I work with her almost every day on some exercise. She made it to one physical therapy appointment before the lockdown. Okay.
Yes.
And so, I mean, she's really been SOL, or as we would say in the military, Sierra Oscar Lima, shit out of luck. Okay.
Absolutely.
When it comes to she basically needs to be able to get back in there and start working out again. But as a result, I didn't have a haircut since the end of October. Now, by now, I look like I should be in a painted up Volkswagen bus headed to San Francisco, right?
Me too. Me too. I look like an aged hippie. At least you got hair on top of your head. All I've got is on the sides, so I look really.
Well, I was just going nuts. Okay, and I got barber's clippers, the electric kind. That's what the Vixter used on me. As a matter of fact, I got two of them, one for the dogs and one for me. So
ever get them
anyway,
confused?
I'm just going crazy. So we've got some friends that live down at the bottom of the lane from us. And this lady and Vicky are real close. And her daughter, okay, who's in her 30s now, and she's a firecracker. What a card she is. But they were up here a couple of weeks ago. And I asked this gal, I said, look, when you were a kid, a teenager, I said, did you ever work, on your girlfriend's hair and that kind of thing? And, oh, yeah, a little bit, yeah, we would do each other's hair. And I said, well, I got a question to ask you. How would you like to cut my hair? She said, I'll have to think about that, Dawn. I don't know. Well, the other night, her and a girlfriend dropped by. They came up. They wanted to walk our little dog, Joey, around, take him for a walk.
Sure.
She loves our dogs. And
Sure.
So they did, and they came back. And then she walked into the dining room. She said, all right, you ready? And I said, for what? Well, if you want, I'll give you a haircut. And I said, really? So I got
Don,
all the gear out.
I haven't been that lucky around here at my apartment place.
Yeah, well, I got all the gear out, and we went in the back door, and I sat right outside the back door on the patio, and she got those clippers, and honest to God, John, it looks like a professional deal. I couldn't believe it. But we swept up 3 piles of hair off half off that floor. I mean, oh my God, I felt like a new person, really. Hey, now let's do a little science.
I've decided I have a craving now for tofu and rice and painting
black
peace
beans.
symbols
Don't
on
forget
my
the black
calendar.
beans. Okay, we got a comment from one of our chat room users, Libertas. And it sounds like he's fed up, John. Says, tell Dr. Brandenburg we're sick of and tired of him holding out on his moon info. So what do you say to that, John?
I don't have any real info, Libertas. I mean, the moon, it's up there, and, if you want to really get insight into the whole moon thing, you should watch the old Japanese science fiction movie, Mysterians, where they're watching alien spacecraft maneuvering over the moon in a science fiction scenario. And I hate to break it to him, but I don't know much about the moon. I was part of the Clementine mission to the moon, and we took really nice pictures of the moon, and that's.
But you weren't allowed to see most of them, were you? Personally.
Well, they processed all the pictures in one end of the building, and we were told to stay away. That's all I better say about that. It's
now wait a minute. You don't expect I'm going to stop there.
My great science fiction novel, Morning Star Pass, The Collapse of the UFO Cover-Up. I have alien bases on the far side of the moon, and the U.S. government is constantly watching them, and they notice they're expanding.
In your book, right?
And in the trilogy, we end up landing the U.S. military and the Russians and everybody else goes up, and they land on the front side of the moon, advance around to the far side, and as the Marines say, they secure those moon bases. So it's a great trilogy. The little short gray aliens end up having to fight a ground war, which they have no appetite for and are not equipped for. And so, the moon is real estate, important real estate, and it's a common science fiction scenario that anyone interested in invading the Earth would first establish bases on especially the lunar far side, where they can't be seen. The moon, of course, orbits the Earth and always keeps the same face pointed at the Earth. So the far side is perpetually hidden. We only see that with spacecraft. And, of course, we've now mapped it completely.
We've got a lunar orbiter up there right now, don't we?
What's that? Oh, yeah, we have the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO. And let me tell you about Washington, D.C. The agency that runs all of the spy satellites for the U.S. government is called the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office. Its very name used to be classified. And it would have remained classified except they had a slush fund they'd built up from their programs, and they decided to build a fancy new office building right near Dulles Airport, and this was noticed by a bunch of congressmen and senators driving past who wondered, what is that shiny new building that doesn't have any sign out front saying what it is? And eventually it came out in a congressional hearing that that was the headquarters of the NRO. Now, anything in space that rhymes with NRO is probably owned by the NRO. That means the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, the LRO, and the MRO, which is the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. So, Uncle Sammy is, let's say, taking a long look at the situation on the Moon and Mars. And there. And so I put that all in my science fiction, of course.
Okay. Now I got, excuse me, I got another note that just came in from one of our chat room users at ERRT Radio. Okay. And he's asking, so you made how many orbits around the moon and you didn't land? Now, I think I'm speculating that he's confused about the Clementine mission up there that was orbiting the moon. I mean, there would have been a hell of a lot of orbits around the moon, but this was not equipped to land. This is strictly recon, right?
We orbited the moon for 2 months, and I think the orbits were roughly once a day, so there were like at least 60 orbits. And the spacecraft was to test a bunch of sensors that had been developed during the Strategic Defense Initiative, and they worked beautifully. So it was a very, very successful mission, and I'm very proud to have been part of it. Basically, it was not intended to ever land any place on the moon. It was just supposed to orbit it and take a bunch of pictures. And it took pictures through a whole bunch of different filters, everything from the infrared all the way into the ultraviolet, with these marvelous new cameras. And it had been developed through the Reagan Star Wars program. And it was very, very successful. Everything worked perfectly.
That orbiter was basically a spy satellite, was it not?
Well, it was basically, I think a spy satellite would have had bigger cameras. It was based like the LRO is basically a spy satellite from Earth orbit that's been sent up to be parked around the moon so it can read license plates of limousines on the lunar far side. Let me put it that way.
Well, let me use my logic, John. Okay, let me just for a moment. Let me use my logic. Now, you're part of the Clementine mission, okay? They have a separate department receiving all the incoming photographs from their orbiter, all right, in a different part of the building, and you were told to stay away. Now, you were told to stay away. So, the people in your department were not privy to the photographs they were getting in there. Now, if the moon is this barren, lifeless place, let me finish.
Yes.
This barren, lifeless place where nothing has changed for 1 billion years, then my common sense tells me, what the hell were they looking for?
Olivine, one of the NASA scientists who was on the part of the mission, she was obsessed with finding olivine, which is a kind of greenish rock on Earth, and they wanted to find that on the moon. We had a whole team of NASA scientists flying, as part of the mission, and they were basically interested in mineralogy. The cameras were not, didn't have as high enough magnification to really look at stuff much below, maybe 10, 20, 30 meters across. But they were looking for mapping of minerals in particular. And so that was sort of their goal, was to try and get they were basically using what was a Department of Defense mission to test a bunch of sensors to just gain some scientific insight into the moon. And the sensors were much better than anything we'd had during the Apollo era. So that was how they kind of explained it to me. I was helping the mission manager as a troubleshooter, and there was constantly small little technical glitches on the spacecraft. Every space mission has a whole host of little problems that pop up, and I was helping to kind of keep those under control. So the fact that we were told not to go back to the image processing area, I just took as, well, they're busy back there, and we have a job to do up here in the front, keeping the spacecraft running, and it all worked out very well. Very successful mission. And, of course, now we have much more sophisticated spacecraft flying around the moon. They've found all of the lunar landing sites where the Apollo, they can tell which flags are still standing up there and which ones got knocked over by the blast when the lunar ascent vehicle took off to return back to orbit. So it was, and our big discovery was discovered large amounts of water ice on the moon at the pole, north and south pole, enough to support large human populations on the moon. So
now, that brings something to mind, all right?
Yes.
This brings something to mind, and I would be very interested in your take. A few weeks ago, on my Saturday Open Line show, we had John Lear as a guest. Now,
John Lear.
Lear.
Yes.
Yes, we had Lear on as a guest. Now, John has some, shall we say, and I'm trying to be very nice and kind and sweet and gentle. So let me just say he has some eccentric ideas about space.
I haven't kept up with his latest ideas.
Okay.
But when I knew him back in the 90s, yes, he had a few eccentric ideas. But
yes, he had some eccentric ideas, and here they are, just several of them. Number one, it's basically impossible for human astronauts to get to the moon because they would die going through the Van Allen radiation belt. Number two, there are currently, my friend, 50 million beings currently living on Luna. Our moon,
beings.
50 million. And throughout the solar system, there are, I forget now how many planets he said, that have sentient life on them. Something like 50 in our solar system. So,
well, that's an interesting opinion.
Yes, I thought so too.
These are
So
interesting
let's take them from the get-go. Astronauts going through the Van Allen radiation belt.
Well, the Van Allen radiation belts are not a spherical shell around the Earth. Some people may have given the impression they are, but if you look at diagrams, and they have them very well mapped, they are basically, it's a belt. It is not a shell around the Earth. So that means if you head out of the southern part of the, if you're in orbit and you head to the south in that orbit with your rocket, and you will actually miss most of the Van Allen belt. And especially if you're flying very fast, as the Apollo astronauts were, then you can head right off to the moon and, let's say, get a very small dose. There's another factor in this that people don't talk about, but it's true, is that the Apollo spacecraft, where the astronauts rode most of their time, the command module, apparently had some very sophisticated radiation protection. Now, of course, that would be the product of, we were constantly prepared to fight a nuclear war during that era. So the U.S. government did not talk about the sophisticated radiation protections they had in the lunar module. So if you combine the very, very latest military radiation protection on the module, where the astronauts spend most of their time, a southern exit from Earth orbit to miss the most of the Van Allen belt, and the fact that they were flying very fast, because, of course, they're firing their big Saturn V rocket upper stage to get a big boost to escape the Earth's gravity and go to the moon. So you're going very fast when you do encounter any radiation in space in a belt, and you fly through it very fast. So those three factors mean that, yes, you can go to the moon without any trouble. And if you look at pictures from the Apollo era, one of the things you'll notice, there are pictures of the Earth, they always show the South Pole, Antarctica, as they were leaving the Earth, and that's because they were flying south, not over Antarctica, but into the southern latitudes, simply because they wanted to avoid parts of the Van Allen radiation belt, which is a belt around the equator, basically.
Okay, let's
how that all worked out.
Let's shoot to the moon now. 50 million beings currently living on the moon. Now, I tried to get him to tell me, where in the hell did you hear that, John? He said, well, basically,
I
heard
from me.
Oh, okay,
I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. He didn't hear that from me.
No.
John Lear and I talked a lot in the 90s, and he helped me. He sponsored me to come and talk about Mars at the big MUFON meeting there. That was great fun. And so if he says there's 50 million, he said he called them beings.
Well, yeah, humanoids or whatever. Hell, I don't know.
Well, that sounds like my science fiction trilogy, where they have a large population on the far side of the moon, most of which are just little kind of worker aliens. They fortunately don't have enough soldiers to defend the place from a determined human attack. on the ground, especially when the Russians come in from the east and the Americans and the other NATO allies come in from the west, all with blood in their eye.
Guess what, buddy? We are right now.
Actually, in my novel, they had roughly 30 million aliens living on the far side of the moon, most of whom were not soldier ants. Sounds
like a ripe target for a nuke. John, we got to take our top of the hour break. We'll pick this up when we get back. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dark Matters Radio. My very special guest, longtime friend, Dr. John Brandenburg, is our guest this evening. We got a bunch more coming up, so stick around, all of it.
Hey, this check is wrong. I worked a holiday and 7 hours of overtime. Not getting paid correctly is a real pain. It could also hurt our boss if our company provides out-of-compliance checks. That's right, construction companies doing business with the government can get fined, or officials of the companies can go to jail if the checks aren't right. It's a law. The Davis-Bacon Act has 30 compliance issues for every check, but there is an easy way for construction companies to be in compliance. EMARS offers Compliant Client, a web-based system that finds and corrects all 30 of the possible out-of-compliance check issues. Users of Compliant Client report an 80% savings in time and money. Running a weekly payroll usually takes about 5 minutes. All 15,000 plus clients of EMARS have never had a legal compliance issue. Plus, they sleep better on check day. Contact EMARS at emarsinc.com or call 480-595-0466.
Ew, yuck. They're unhealthy and gross. Bugs, I hate bugs. We keep a clean home, but occasionally bugs show up. Well, I found something that is tougher than bugs. Orange Guard. From contact, it kills bugs. Plus, Orange Guard kills hidden bugs and keeps new bugs away for weeks. I know. I use Orange Guard. Plus, all of the ingredients of Orange Guard are on the FDA generally regarded as safe list. Orange Guard may be used around food, humans, and pets. It promotes a healthier planet, and here's a bonus. Orange Guard cleans where it's sprayed. Plus, it comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Orange Guard.
You can get Orange Guard at Ace Hardware. And listen, folks, Orange Guard is tougher than bugs, and it's safe to use. Go to orangeguard.com. That's orangeguard.com.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app. Free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Now you have the inside contact for alternative talk radio. The Planet. KGRAradio.com.
And we are back with Dr. John Brandenburg. John, while you were waxing poetically on the Van Allen radiation belt and 50 million aliens, I guess, living on the moon, we got several more questions coming in from the chat lounge. Neutron wants to know, Dr. Brandenburg, during the Voyager probe mission, was NASA Ames fighting or arguing with NASA JPL for the data downloads at that time?
Oh, you got to understand the NASA centers are like separate football teams in the NFL. They have rivalries and they don't get along, even though they're all supposed to be part of the same league. And so nothing would surprise me. And Jet Propulsion Lab considers itself the most important NASA center. In fact, it considers itself, we discovered on the Clementine mission, because Golden wanted us to go to Mars, because JPL lost its Mars observer on the way to Mars, or it was supposed to come back, go into Mars orbit and then call back NASA, and it never called back.
That's because they shut it off, and when they turned it back on, nothing came on.
What's that?
They shut it off. They rebooted the thing on the way to Mars.
They lost the Voyager spacecraft out past Neptune for about 2 weeks because its transmitter suddenly switched frequency, and they had to hunt carefully and finally find it. And so they managed to do that, and that's 100 times further out than the Mars observer was. Mars is, right next door to us, and they lost track of that Mars observer, and there's never been, in my opinion, a real explanation of how they could have lost that spacecraft so completely without a trace. It's quite remarkable. But anyway, I'll just tell you that we discovered during that fuss, when Golden wanted us to send a Clementine to Mars, that Jet Propulsion Lab only followed orders from NASA headquarters when they felt like it. They got in a big battle with him over that.
Why?
And they basically said they had the Mars franchise and nobody else could go to Mars except Jet Propulsion Lab. And even though Golden basically wanted us to go to Mars, it didn't make any difference. If he was sitting there in the headquarters building and was the head of NASA, they basically called up their congressional delegation, senators and congresspeople from California, and lobbied heavily that, our military, they said our military spacecraft should not go to Mars. So I can tell you that if Ames, and if you hear stories of Ames and Jet Propulsion Lab getting in big fights over who owns data and who gets to look at it, that wouldn't surprise me at all. That happens just all the time.
Boy, I'll tell you, that makes me, that's going to make me sleep better tonight, John.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I hope it doesn't disillusion you, Don.
Well, the Mars Observer, there was a hell of a lot more to that story than them turning it off and turning it back on. We did a huge piece on that in UFO Magazine. That was what, 93, John? Was that 93?
Yes, roughly 93.
Yeah, well, here's what I uncovered when that thing, it was $1.5 billion space shot with the technology and the, all the tech on board and what have you, the entire probe. But we were following that because before it ever took off, there was, and you probably will know a lot about this, there was a hell of a fight about whether they were going to include a camera on that mission.
Yes, we were part of that debate. We, of course, urged that. I actually talked to 2 senators about getting a camera on board so they could rephotograph the objects at Cydonia Mensa.
Cydonia, yeah. And NASA was not going to have a camera on board. They were finally forced to. Now, Ladies and gentlemen, there's a hell of a lot more to that story. As it was getting ready to lift off, a huge hurricane hit the Cape, hit Florida. If I remember, it was Hurricane Andrew, I think. But at any rate, there was a hell of a hurricane. And they had to cancel the launch until the hurricane was over. Now, after it was all over, tremendous damage throughout Florida. They went up to the spacecraft and they thought, well, you know what? The craft, the probe should be good, but just to be sure, we're going to take it off the rocket. We're going to take it into the clean room and examine it. Well, guess what they found? Now,
what
remember.
What did they find, John?
Say again?
What did they find?
They found, now this thing had been hooked up to a nitrogen system to make sure that nothing got inside the craft. They took it off, took it into the clean room, opened it up, and in the compartment with the camera, they found debris that literally looked like somebody had swept up the floor, put it all in a dustpan, then dumped it into the compartment, and there was a greasy substance like Vaseline or something that was smeared all over the camera lens. So now just think about what would have happened in a zero-G environment with all that debris inside the compartment. Would have been floating around, playing havoc with the electronics. And even if they would have used the camera, guess what? They wouldn't have gotten any photographs because the lens were basically obstructed. Now,
well, Vaseline on the lens, that's an old Hollywood trick, you know?
Yeah. Big shock. Nobody knew what the hell happened. So we're doing an article on this. And of course, at the time, one of the main proponents yelling loud and long was Richard Hoagland. Okay. I talked to Hoagland then about this.
I've heard of Richard,
with my background in law enforcement and my background in the military, I looked at Vicky and I said, somebody sabotaged that. That debris didn't come in from the hurricane. Somebody deliberately did that. No. So we called up NASA, and I talked to their public relations people. And I said, what are you guys going to do about this? Well, sir, we're holding an investigation. And then what? Well, we won't know until the investigation is over. Well, are you going to tell anybody what you find? Well, we'll have to see where this goes. And to make a long story short, after that, they never addressed that publicly. Now, wait, there's more. Just like the Ginsu knife commercial. There's more. So they take off. They go to Mars, right? They're a couple of days out. Then some moron, for whatever reason, decides to shut off all the telemetry and turn it back on. No reason given. I don't know what the reason was. John, maybe you know. But they shut it off, and they turned it back on, and they lost the goddamn spacecraft.
Oh, we heard a long, elaborate post-mortem. Naval Research Lab was put in charge of the accident investigation, they called it. And there were a number of very odd things about the whole procedure associated with that. And if Cydonia is what we now believe it is, archaeological site, then this is a national security matter. and you have people in funny hats sneaking through the bushes that are kind of secret partners in the whole investigation of Mars. And that was especially true at the Mars Observer point. What was fascinating, Don, was the Mars Observer was actually planned to be the last U.S. probe to Mars for decades. But because it suddenly disappeared like it did, especially because there was this big buildup that it was going to take pictures of Cydonia Mensa and put that thing to bed. It was going to lay that whole matter to rest. That's what Mike Malin, the guy in charge of the camera, kept saying. We're going to prove it to you that it's nothing but a funny-shaped hill. And when that thing disappeared, Mars became suddenly the most important planet in the solar system next to Earth. And, there in Washington, D.C., because I was working on the Clementine mission at the time, in Washington, D.C., this was treated like a major crisis. It was as if an Iranian torpedo boat had put a torpedo into one of our destroyers in the Straits of Hormuz or something. It was treated as a major crisis in the circles that I was operating in. And as I said, in fact, Golden even wanted us to build another Clementine spacecraft and send it to Mars. We just sort of had to make bigger solar panels to power it out near Mars, where sunlight is only half of Earth. So but you must understand that the government is not a monolith. It can act at cross purposes to itself. The right hand and the left hand knoweth not what they each are doing, and occasionally they get in arm wrestling matches.
Well, do you agree that it was sabotaged?
Well, Don, of course I don't know, but it looks very suspicious that you would lose a spacecraft like that so completely. Especially because
I'm talking about what the hell they found in the clean room, John.
All the telemetry. They had gone through the procedures and they decided that it was unnecessary to turn off all of the spacecraft telemetry during this rocket burn to get into Mars orbit. But then they went ahead and did it anyway. And so
I'm talking about the debris that was in the camera department.
That report, yes, that certainly looks like sabotage, and the Vaseline on the lens, and yeah, somebody did not want those pictures taken, and apparently they wanted the. They wanted
I got to tell you, even now, all these years later,
go to Mars
and
not have a functioning camera. That was one way to take care of it. But as what often happens, remember the Watergate break-in? The Watergate burglars put tape on the lock on the offices they were putting bugs in. And then the security guard came around, found the tape on the lock, took it off, and then the burglars put the tape back on, retaped the lock. And so, giving the security guard the tip-off that not only was the place being burglarized, but the burglars were still in the building. And so, this gets very much into dark comedy. This government, the United States, has a very limited conspiratorial heritage compared to other countries like Russia and China. And so we don't do cover-ups very well. They almost always fumble the ball. And so So it's it sounds like somebody was trying to sabotage it. And, I understand why. Cydonia mensa was considered a kind of a national security matter in those days. And,
well, if it's as old as you theorize, all right, over 200 million years ago, and that's your theory on when the nuclear device was or two nuclear devices were detonated on Mars.
Apparently 2 of them.
How could that be national security today? Unless, as Zechariah Sitchin told me many years ago, he believed that some ancient extraterrestrial bases on Mars had been reactivated. Now, what do you think about that?
Well, I have that in my science fiction novel. After they get done taking the lunar bases, the humans basically invade Mars, and there's some alien, gray alien bases on Mars that then fall to the human forces, who by that time are just unstoppable. And so it's Mars is another convenient place to use as a staging area if you're interested in Earth. The most, looking at it as, when I wrote it as a science fiction scenario, I had bases on the moon because the gray aliens were going to invade Earth. They hoped to take it over. And they also had some bases on Mars, too, to support that. But most of them are on the moon. And in my novel, they lose 30 million on the moon. It's a real disaster for them. In a living universe, possibilities multiply. And, of course, I'm trying to write good science fiction, and so I try to make science fiction scenarios that make logical sense, and, of course, that makes great logical sense, that you would have, if the Earth was threatened in a science fiction scenario, you'd have bases on the moon to support that threat, as well as bases on Mars. Just because Mars is a close-by, convenient place. You can't have them on Venus. Venus's surface is, hot enough to melt lead, and it's a very bad place to try and build anything. Mars, however, is a fairly reasonable place to live, have a colony. So that was how I looked at it as a science fiction writer.
Well, let me ask you, talking about the building blocks to maintain a human presence, you had mentioned that a great amount of water ice was discovered on the moon, on the north and south poles. Why there, John? How do you think it was deposited there? By what means or process?
Well, the moon, of course, has very weak gravity. It's only 1/6 of Earth. So if you have water vapor, it can't hold. It's too small to hold an atmosphere. The atmosphere eventually, all of the molecules racing around on Earth reach escape velocity on the moon at the temperatures of room temperature. They eventually escape off into space. So unless they freeze. So the things that end up being trapped on the moon and staying there are like if comets, which are dirty snowballs, impact the moon, and we believe that happened a lot in the early part of the solar system, then the water vapor that's created when those dirty snowballs hit the lunar surface and vaporize, that water vapor ends up going all around the moon and forming kind of a temporary atmosphere But at the lunar poles, it's very cold, just like it is on Earth, at the north and south pole of Earth. And so you can actually get the water vapor coming out as a kind of frost covering the rocks, and then it gets covered with layers of moon dust. And if this happens this process happens for like 500 million years, then you end up with, as Carl Sagan would say, billions of tons of water ice trapped there. And it's trapped there because it freezes, because it's cold. And so,
now, what kind of process would human explorers going to the moon, setting up a human habitation, how would what's the mechanical process they would have to do in order to tap into that frozen water?
Well, there's two methods. One is you go there with nuclear power, and you have as much energy as you want, and you basically just scoop up, you basically just have a little hop loader down there, and you scoop up lunar soil from the bottom of these craters and dump it in a big pot, sealed pot, and cook it, and the water vapor just comes out. And then you collect that water vapor away from after it's boiled out of the rocks and condense it, and then you have water. And interestingly enough, another liquid that ends up being in the water a lot is mercury, of all things. So you have to make sure that you strain out all the mercury, which you can do chemically, from that water, so that it's you can use it for human consumption. And also you can make rocket fuel out of it. You just run electricity through it with nuclear power, and you have hydrogen and oxygen. Another nice thing about the moon is because it doesn't have any cloud cover, you can just put up a big solar mirror and capture a bunch of sunlight, even at the north and south pole, and just focus the sunlight on the rocks that you want to heat. And so all you need is heat energy and a way to capture the water vapor that then comes off of these rocks, and you have as much water as you could possibly need for everything.
Well, that'd be pretty darn handy, you
water
bet.
For growing plants, everything. Water for making rocket fuel. Water is one of the most, like on the space station, they have a water economy. They use water to make oxygen for the astronauts. They use it for, drinking, also moving heat, steam heat, et cetera, et cetera. The water is just an extremely useful chemical substance. And not only that, you can drink it. So, and make rocket fuel out of it. So finding all that water on the moon just means that the moon is going to be very important real estate in the future for the human race.
Well, speaking about the moon, okay, got another question from, let me see who this was from. Libertas again. He said, Dr. Brandenburg, what are your thoughts on President Trump's recent statement the U.S. and private corporations should be now mining the moon?
Well, Trump, is basically not a politician. He's a businessman. And a rather flamboyant one. He likes big projects that are big and showy, and that's how he built his big empire. And so he naturally thinks that since the Earth, the United States landed on the moon 6 times. Imagine winning a race in your race car with somebody and then doing 6 victory laps just to rub it in. That's what we did to the Russians. The Russians, in fact, landed their own probes on the moon, scooped up rocks and brought them back to Earth, And that's how they knew that we had landed on the moon, because moon rocks are very different from Earth rocks, and they actually arranged a meeting where we traded rocks from our Apollo samples. We traded them with the Russians from their robotic sampling. So even though we have a treaty called the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, it sounds like something from science fiction, but it is a ratified treaty that says that we cannot claim the moon as our national territory. It says nothing about mining rights and exploiting the economic potentials of the moon. The president also wants to go to Mars, and if you establish a moon base and make rocket fuel there, it makes getting to Mars much easier. If you launch your Mars trip from the moon, or at least refuel it at the moon, and then go to Mars. So he's just a very ambitious fellow.
Well, okay. Once again, speaking of Mars, I got another question in from one of our chat room users, Neutron. And he says, Dr. Brandenburg, of everything wild that Richard Hoagland said about Mars,
yes,
what do you agree with that Hoagland has said?
Well, basically, Dick Hoagland is a brilliant fellow, but he's more of a journalist. I'm a physicist, so I would just simply say, Dick Hoagland and I both agree that Mars used to be the site of apparently a humanoid civilization. We have even different, our theories kind of diverge from that point, but we both agree on that point, that Mars appears to have been the home of a humanoid civilization. Like Earth, I say it was a primitive civilization. He thinks it might have been a very advanced civilization. We'll have to go up there and see. I myself believe that Mars used to have a climate like Earth for a long period. He's not sure. He thinks Mars may have been colonized by some advanced aliens and perhaps terraformed temporarily to be like Earth, but that it wasn't like Earth for much of its past. So those are two very interesting scientific kind of theories. I say the reason we find stuff on Mars that looks like archaeology from Earth is that Mars and Earth had very similar histories up until apparently this large nuclear event on Mars. And Dick has favored the idea that Mars was maybe colonized by some advanced aliens who changed Mars so it could be colonized. And that would explain, why Mars looks so different from Earth. It has so many craters, because he says that Mars wasn't like Earth for most of its history, just maybe a brief period when these people terraformed it. So that's those are the two basic differences. That's the basic differences between what I believe about Mars and what Dick Hoagland believes. But we both agree that it was the site of intelligent humanoid life. And that's the really most important thing.
Well, a couple of things, John, a couple of things. Number one, back in the early 90s, when I was doing my first radio show, UFOs Tonight, which ran on CRN, the cable radio network, I was doing some research. This was the time when the Mars Observer was getting ready to go. There was a tremendous amount of chaos regarding putting a camera on that. the Cydonia region, whether it was a face, a hill, whatever, that was creating a tremendous amount of turmoil.
Yes.
People were going out to JPL, picketing JPL. I'm sure you remember all this.
Oh, yes,
Now,
yes.
I was doing some research on Mars, and one of my go-to guys back in those days was the written records of Donald Keyhoe. Now, one of Keyhoe, huh?
Oh, no. Yes, Donald Keyhoe of NICAP.
Right. Now, in one of Keyhoe's
patriotic
books,
American,
he talked about a Japanese astronomer, actually a Mars astronomer in the 30s, along about 1937, a guy by the name of Sahiki, Dr. Sahiki. I don't know what his first name was, but he was based in Japan. This was before, of course, the outbreak of World War II. Now, Sahiki observed something very strange on Mars in real time. And I want to see if you have any insight into this. He witnessed what he thought was a tremendous explosion. In hindsight, it resembled what we would recognize today as a nuclear blast, but a tremendous explosion. Then for the next weeks and months, something Sahiki described as a blue, the color blue, a bluing effect that overtook the entire planet until it dissipated. Do you know anything about that?
No, but it's quite plausible. Mars, of course, has a group of enormous volcanoes. All it would take is for, like, Mount Olympus Mons, to have a major eruption. And since the Mars atmosphere is so thin, if you have like a Mount St. Helens-like eruption on Mars of Olympus Mons, then it's going to change the entire Martian atmosphere for weeks. You're going to get a big mushroom cloud of ash and gases coming out. The bluing effect could just mean that the atmosphere got denser and scattered more blue light. I mean, and this is a long-running, almost comical thing. The Jet Propulsion Lab has kept insisting that the skies on Mars are actually red. Well, maybe near the horizon. If you go out in the desert, you look at on horizon, it looks dusty reddish color. But the Martian atmosphere is composed of carbon dioxide, clear gas, and that scatters blue light preferentially. So you have blue skies on Mars. And so if that atmosphere becomes denser due to a bunch of water vapor and carbon dioxide, other gases that come out of volcanoes being launched into the atmosphere, it will look bluer for a couple weeks till that atmosphere basically escapes into outer space because of the ultraviolet of Mars, breaking up all the molecules of oxygen and water vapor. So it's quite plausible that what he saw was a volcanic eruption.
Is there anything currently to indicate that Mars is still geologically active? I thought the general consensus was Mars was geologically dead.
Well, now they've landed a seismometer on Mars, and apparently Mars is kind of a noisy planet, indicating there are apparently geologic forces operating under Mars that make Mars quakes and probably volcanic eruptions. I mean, if you look at the summits of the Mars volcanoes, a lot of them have no craters in them, indicating that in the last maybe even 1,000 years, they have actually erupted. So Mars, just like Mars skies are red as opposed to being blue, and you ask people at Jet Propulsion Lab, well, how do you know that? Or, how come the Hubble takes a picture of Mars and it shows a blue sheen around the planet just like on Earth, meaning blue skies on Mars, and they'll say, well, there's trouble sometimes mixing the colors. Well, they've solved all of those problems. They basically are stuck saying the Mars atmosphere is red when it's actually blue. And they're also stuck by saying, oh, when we flew over Mars, we didn't pick up any geothermal heat sources, so that indicates that Mars is geologically dead, when apparently it isn't. It can't be dead if it has big volcanoes with, summit lavas that don't have any craters in them. So you have two forces operating in the Mars community. One is the steady accumulation of new data from better and better spacecrafts. That's one force, and the analysis that comes from that. And then you have a group of people who still insist that Mars is kind of a national security arena, and therefore the narrative at Mars is it's a dead planet. It's always been dead, and there's no dead civilizations or anything like that on it. So you have those two forces competing, basically, and so that's how I understand it. You have people who established a narrative that Mars was like the moon; it was dead, and it's always been dead. And then you have the new data, which indicates that Mars was a living planet like Earth, and is still a living planet. That's why they see those spikes of methane in the Martian atmosphere, methane and oxygen. So, in my science fiction novel, when the first people who land on Mars, they're military, they look up and the Mars sky is blue, and they're amazed because nobody in their briefings said that to them.
Yeah.
And one of them comments
your
that
theory,
the Mars cover-up
your
continues,
thesis,
even though the UFO cover-up is over.
Your thesis on the detonations on Mars, all right?
By the way, Don, there's also the possibility that somebody was having a disagreement on Mars.
Okay, but let me get my thought out. My thought is this: your time frame is roughly somewhere between 230 to 250 million years ago. Now, for us, that's a hell of a long time. Cosmologically speaking, that's barely an eye blink. But the planet Earth has also experienced a number of apparently planetary-wide extinctions. Do any of those extinction events that Earth has suffered coincide with the what appears to be a nuclear attack on Mars? In other words, what I'm getting at, if you're correct, and somebody nuked Mars, might they have also nuked Earth?
Just to be sure, yes. The Great Permian Extinction was the most. Earth almost turned into another Mars during the Great Permian Extinction. And the Great Permian Extinction is different from all other previous and other extinctions that we're aware of, is that almost all the life in the oceans died. the things like when the dinosaurs got wiped out by the Chicxulub asteroid impact, the oceans weren't really very much affected. The dinosaurs, the big land animals, were all affected, but not the animals in the ocean. But during the Great Permian extinction, almost all the animals in the ocean died. One of the interesting things is one of the survivors of the Great Permian extinction is the cockroach, and the cockroach is known to be rather resistant to radiation. It will survive a nuclear war that will wipe out the human race. So I have told people in my book, Death on Mars, that they should be looking for isotopic signatures that may indicate a large nuclear explosion on Earth during the Great Permian extinction. And also, just to finish the previous discussion, the Japanese astronomers saw what looked like a very large explosion. Mars is next to the asteroid belt, and it could have been an asteroid impacting Mars, or if you have alien bases on Mars in kind of a science fiction scenario, then it could be two competing groups of aliens on Mars having a disagreement.
Okay, one of our users wants to know, Dr. Brandenburg, how big were the bombs that nuked Mars? Not yield, but the size.
Oh, how large physically? They were roughly the size of the Empire State Building.
The actual bomb casing?
Yep. I calculated the size. I spent more than 9.5 years at nuclear weapons labs. I didn't work directly on nuclear weapons, but just by casual conversations, I learned a lot about how they function and how to construct them. I'm talking about national laboratories at Sandia Laboratories and also National Lawrence Livermore National Lab, and we're talking in the 70s and 80s, so that's more than 40 years ago. So we're talking big, crude nuclear weapons. Nothing fancy about them except their size, and
my God, you'd have to have a vessel of enormous size, like the one I discovered in that Phobos 2 photograph, to carry something that big.
We're talking about bombs that were probably themselves big space torpedoes. You could come to the asteroid belt and build them in the asteroid belt and then move them to Mars and have them impact Mars. And because, the asteroid belt has a lot of asteroids full of uranium and thorium and other things that could be used to make nuclear weapons. And so that's how it would be sort of done as a practical matter. And the bombs themselves would not have been carried on board spacecraft. They would have basically been just big missiles
launched from the asteroids belt?
Yeah, launched from the asteroid belt. Mars is a big target. The bombs were so big, they didn't have to be very precisely aimed. One of them hit near Cydonia Mensa, another one hit in the Utopia region near a place called Galaxis Chaos, which is another archaeological site, apparently. It's got two faces, whereas the Cydonia Mensa only has a face and a pyramid. But so they were...
you'd have to really be angry with somebody to do that, wouldn't you?
From the asteroid belt into Mars.
You'd really have to be upset at somebody to do that, wouldn't you?
Oh, it caused me to fall into a profound depression when I first discovered that this is what the data indicated. For one thing, the radiation scars that mark there's two hot spots of radiation on Mars, indicating where the two weapons went off. There's no craters there. This
airburst, right? They had to be airburst.
They had to be airburst. They were dropped from space into Mars, and like I said, when I worked for 9.5 years at two nuclear weapons labs, so I learned a lot about nuclear weapons and how they're used and things like that. So I fell into a almost clinical depression after kind of putting this all together, and I had to, in fact, my response was to write a book called Cosmic Jesus, to focus on something very positive, and to get me out of that depression, because I was raising two children. I had two children in high school. I was a single parent, and suddenly I'd found out this thing, and so it was. It just shows that evil is not a human invention. Evil is out there in the cosmos, and we should be aware of dealing with the cosmos, just like we have to be careful about dealing with nations on Earth like the People's Republic of China. We have to, we have to have a space force. We must become spacefaring.
Well, let me ask you this, and this is something that I've been thinking about literally now for a number of years. Enrico Fermi made created a very incisive question roughly 70 years ago, when he was having lunch with a number of other scientists, and they were discussing the newspaper reports talking about flying saucers. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, the news used to cover those quite extensively. And
yes, they did.
Fermi said, well, if they're aliens, and I'm paraphrasing, where are they at? Which actually, if you think about it, was a damn good question. Now, we've been listening to the sky since we basically invented radio. Although the first SETI search was backed by Frank Drake back in about 1958, 59, and listening for extraterrestrial signals, artificial signals from outer space. With the exception of several oops, we've never really detected any. Now, John, I've often thought, especially with your scenario of Mars being nuked at some point, apparently wiping out an indigenous population. What if there are some extremely advanced groups out in the cosmos that are very unfriendly, very unfriendly, and everybody else knows about them, and that's the reason the skies are so damn quiet? Have you ever thought about that?
Well, it's possible that people search for extraterrestrial intelligence using these radio waves, and it's very possible that truly intelligent aliens keep quiet out there because they don't want to attract any attention to themselves. Yes, it's like we expected we would be living in a very living universe that would, Fermi was just a brilliant problem solver. They said he could take a few pieces of data and construct a very elaborate theory connecting all the dots, and it would turn out to be true, quicker than just about anybody. And So he says, where the hell are they? The rest of the aliens that are supposed to be here in the universe, we're here. We're not that unique. There should be whole bunches of people like us out there, and they should be sending us radio broadcasts now, but they aren't. It's like we're living in a ghost town. And this Mars discovery means that not only are we living in a ghost town, but we found a freshly buried body in our backyard with stab wounds, a murder victim. And so, we need a space force. We need to become spacefaring. That's the moral of this story. We have to become very capable in space and very capable of defending ourselves in space, because we don't want to have happen to Earth what happened to Mars. So,
do you think within the military-industrial complex that scenario is recognized of what happened to Mars?
I believe so, yes. I believe, in fact, I believe they've known it since 1976. The moment they sampled the atmosphere and saw the isotopic composition of the xenon in the Martian atmosphere, the spike at xenon 129, which is a signature of nuclear weapons. And they also, of course, in 1976, they had, the Viking landers had landed and sampled the atmosphere at two different spots on Mars. And then they had also taken pictures of Cydonia Mensa with the face and the pyramid nearby it. So they basically knew the whole. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what happened on Mars.
Is there any indication that you could theorize who might have done that?
Oh, I have no insight into who did it or what their motivation was, except things like this have happened on Earth. Genghis Khan was famous for massacring entire cities and making pyramids of heads just to scare everyone. There's the line in the old Star Wars. It's Governor Tarkin. They question why don't we go you take the Death Star to Tatooine and blow it up, and he says, Tatooine is far too remote to make a good example. So they blasted Alderaan because it was a well-populated planet and everybody knew about, so they destroyed it to create terror. So that's why people do things like that, and I'm proud of the fact that I have proposed that what happened on Mars is a scientific hypothesis, and everything that I proposed happening on Mars has already happened on Earth, including dropping of nuclear weapons on large civilian populations at Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah, a lot of people still get tremendous heartburn about that, but they really are not cognizant of what the alternative was.
Oh, no. My Uncle Barney had, he was in the Patton's Third Army, and he was a forward artillery observer. He saw a lot of combat, including the Battle of the Bulge. And as typical of people who've gone through a lot of combat, he never talked about it. We only found out his war record after he had passed on. He just never spoke about it, and that's very similar to a lot of World War II veterans, especially in Russia. and he had survived the war in Europe. He got on a ship, came to the United States. They put him on a train, took him cross country. They were going to put him on a boat to invade Japan. And he and his buddies figured they were all dead men.
Yeah, my father was one of those guys.
The nuclear weapons
John,
were dropped on
we are out of time, and as always, this has been great. I know.
Always a pleasure to be on your show.
I know that you'll come back, huh?
Take questions of your highly intelligent listeners.
Absolutely. Well, look, John, as always, it's been great. Ladies and gentlemen, DMR will be back. We've got a special interview scheduled for next Friday. In the meantime, keep your eyes pointed up, keep your ear to the ground, and we will see you then. Have a great weekend. Good night.